Hello everybody, this is Troy, and in this video we are going to set up our three pieces, our center, our edge, and our corner pieces. Now we previously built the core, and I know that we want to have 19 millimeter cubies, so we have a 57 millimeter cube in the end. What I'm going to do again is hit Shift A, and I'm going to start with a cube. Now when you first create that, you're not going to see anything here because it is by default a 2 millimeter cube, and that's inside here. If I go to wireframe mode, you can see it there. And I want to make this a 19 millimeter cubie, and I could just type in 19 for each of these, but I also want to show you can do math operations in here. So if I want to do a 57 millimeter cube, I can go 57 divided by 3, which will be 19, but you can see that it entered 19 for me. So if there's ever a point where the math doesn't quite work out in your head, you can just type in the math equation in the number, and Blender will do that for you. So that's very handy. And so I'm going to just set these others to 19. And we've got our first cubie. And now I'm going to duplicate this, and I'm going to hit X to move it only in the X, and then I'm going to hold Control because I can see it snapping to individual numbers, and I can see that I've moved it 19 right here. It's out at minus 19, and Shift Duplicate, Shift D, and Z, and we're going to move that, and I could again hold Control. I can see that's at 19, 19, and then I'm going to do Shift D in the Y direction, and we're going to do that one last time. So I now have, and we can get rid of this original one, we now have the start of our cube. We've got a center piece, we've got an edge piece, and we've got a corner piece. Now if I move these pieces around, basically in order to get them back to their spot, I would have to retype in the 19s, the minus 19s, to get them there. And I don't need to move these pieces around anymore. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select each of these, and you can see the center part here, which is the center of the cube. What I'm going to do is hit Control Shift Alt C, and that is going to bring up my set origin point, and I'm going to hit origin to 3D cursor, which right now is in the center of my world here. You could also hit geometry to origin, which would, or I'm sorry, no, you do want to go to 3D cursor. If your cursor is not there, what you should do is hit Shift C first, and that will reset it to 0, or set your cursor here to 0. So what we do is we set that origin to 3D cursor, and you can see those dots disappeared, and they've all moved here. And now the nice thing is, if I move these cubes wherever I want, if I just select them and hit Alt G, they will be set to their 0 position, which in this case is right where they want to be. Now, just to differentiate these a little bit, I'm going to put some materials just so we have some color to work with. And we're going to do that by going over here on this tab, and we're going to set this sphere here and press New. Now, if yours looks different than this, it's because you are in the Blender render up here, and it will look more like this when you create an object. That's fine too. We're not going to be covering rendering, but if you want to be consistent with what I am doing, set this to cycles here, and you can press New, and then for color, let's just give this a actually what I'm going to do is scratch that, go down to settings here. There's another color here related to what the viewport shows instead of the render. We're just going to use that one. So for our center cap, I'm just going to use yellow. I'm going to go New for this, and let's make that one green. And for the corner, I'm going to go ahead and make that one blue. And let's just name these corner, green, edge, and center cap. And let's make our core at the same time. Guanlong core is a kind of a bluish greenish color here. We'll give us something like that, and we'll just call that core. Alright, so we now have our 3 pieces that are going to build this, and we've got no rotation on these pieces at all, but our center point has been placed to the center. So if you actually were to select a corner and an edge and rotate them along Z by using R and Z, you can see how these rotate around. Now I'll duplicate these, rotate Z, and I'll enter 90, and then I will select these 2 again, rotate 180 on Z, and you can see that we've created our cube. So when we build our pieces, we'll be able to build out the entire cube that way from the single pieces that we're going to be building. So I'm just going to delete those now. And what we're going to do next is we're going to build a sphere, which is going to represent the inner core of our cube. So again, I'm going to go to the Shift A menu, and I'm going to select UV sphere. And once that's selected, again, it's very small. It's inside this core here. So I'm going to hit my wireframe. I'm going to zoom in on it a little bit. And I'd like a little more detail in my core. So I'm going to actually take these segments. I'm going to double those segments to 64 and 32. You will see there is some faceting going on when we get to this point. Actually, we're going to do this sphere a little differently. One thing I have going on with the sphere is at the poles of the sphere, you have this, everything kind of comes to a point up here. And when I'm going to be cutting things out of that later, I would prefer a more structured grid. So what I'm going to do instead of the sphere, we're going to create a cube. And I'm going to just scale this arbitrarily here. And over here in the wrench menu, there's a modifier, and that modifier is subdivision surface. And if you apply that, you're going to get the cube to be a more sphere shape. Now, it's not quite a perfect sphere, and if you actually rotate this, you can see how it wobbles a little bit. So to make that a more perfect shape, I'm going to apply another modifier called cast. And by default, cast does a sphere, and the factor is only halfway. I want to make that a full factor of 1. Now, with the 2 of these on, I don't need cast, I don't need to see it anymore, so I'm just going to hide this away. This is a cleaner geometry sphere that I like to use for these. It just creates better looking meshes in the end. And the other benefit is I can always go to this number here, and I can dial in or out detail as I need, and I can do that on the fly. So that's why I go this extra step. And now after adding cast, if you recall seeing that wobble before, the sphere is now a perfect sphere, so we won't have any issues like that. So for the size of the sphere, I'm going to make this, let's just start with 40 and 40 and 40. And that seems like a good starting point for our inner mechanism, so we'll change this later. Now, all I need to do at this point is start cutting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my sphere. I'm going to select my center cap. Again, under Bool tool on the side, I am actually cutting the sphere from the center cap. So I don't want to do this with auto because I want to retain all this for editing. So what I want to do is go here and go difference here. The sphere is now a bounding box, but it's still a sphere. You can see this, and if I select this bounding box and scale, you can see my sphere cutting. I'm going to do the same thing on the edge piece. So we're going to select the sphere, we're going to select the edge piece, and we're going to do again a difference. And I'm going to do again, select the sphere, select the corner, and do the difference. Although we actually won't need that one, so let's remove that one. At this point, we have our main pieces ready. There's going to be some internal mechanisms that we're going to need to do. So let's stop this video here, and then we'll proceed with the internal mechanisms in the next step.